All right, let's get into it. Tonight's dive takes us straight into the chaotic, smoky, and slightly sticky world of medieval taverns, a place where stories started, secrets spread, and people from every walk of life shared a bench, a drink, and sometimes a punch to the face. The tavern wasn't just a bar, it was the heartbeat of the town, the loud, grimy hub where laughter, danger, and germs all coexisted under a thatched roof. Before we wade in too deep, take a second to hit like and subscribe, only if you're actually into this kind of thing, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always wild to see the global crew tuning in. Now get comfy. Turn the lights down low, maybe get a little background noise going, a fan, some rain sounds, whatever helps you feel like you're walking into something old and full of stories. You're drenched, your boots are soggy, and the town stinks of smoke, livestock, and something vaguely like soup gone wrong. It's been raining or just stopped, so the streets are a slick mess, and you've already had to dodge the same turnip cart twice. You need warmth, food, and definitely a drink. But how do you even find a tavern in a place with no signs, no maps, and no reviews? You follow your ears. Somewhere between the clang of the blacksmith's hammer and a fishmonger yelling about his freshest ever river eels, you catch the unmistakable sound of drunken singing, chair scraping, and a chorus of voices trying to talk over each other. That's your clue. Eventually, you see it. A wooden building slouched like it's had a long day. Hanging above the door is a battered sign with a poorly drawn image, possibly a barrel, maybe a bear, maybe both. Whatever it is, this is your stop. You step up, the threshold is sticky with old ale, and when you push the door open, it groans like it's auditioning for a play. Inside, the warmth hits you instantly, along with a thick, muggy blend of smoke, wet wool, overcooked meat, and spilled beer. It's like getting hugged by a drunk uncle, messy, weirdly cozy, and slightly alarming. The place is dim, with low ceilings that force tall men to duck and drunk men to bump their heads more than once. The floor's just dirt, maybe covered in straw to pretend someone tried cleaning. Spoiler, they didn't. No one's handing out menus here. No private booths. No peace and quiet. A medieval tavern only has two modes, open and on fire. You see a spot near the hearth, lopsided bench, suspiciously damp. You don't ask. Nearby, one guy is mid-argument over a stolen chicken, someone else is passed out with a ladle clutched like a baby, and a one-eyed dog is gnawing a bone under a table like he's paying rent. And that's just the first minute. The door slams shut behind you, cutting off the street noise. Now it's just the hum of the room, the clatter, the shouts, the laughter, all muffled by thick, smoky air. Shadows dance on the walls, flickering with the light from scattered candles and the fire in the hearth that's both warming the room and actively threatening to burn it down. You squint through the haze. Then it hits you, the smell. Not just a smell, a full assault on your senses. The tavern reeks in layers. First the ale, spilled, soured, and soaked into every beam and bench. Under that, sweat. Human, animal, maybe something unholy. Add in moldy bread, damp straw, and the sharp bite of boiled onions, and you've got a scent that's less vintage pub and more haunting memory. Welcome to the tavern. You're not just in a room, you're in a whole world, alive, loud, and absolutely unforgettable. The tables in this place are a mess of memories, covered in carved initials, rough sketches, and scars left by years of bored or angry knife users. They wobble, but not like they're about to fall apart, more like they're daring you to complain. The benches creak under layers of muddy boots, heavy cloaks, and life choices that definitely need rethinking. The dirt floor, true to promise, is hidden beneath straw tossed down to soak up spilled drinks, spit, and the occasional body taking an unplanned nap. Every step you take feels like a gamble. The wrong move, and your boot sinks into something you don't want to describe, much less explain. Around you, the tavern hums like a giant, unpredictable beast. A burst of laughter rings out from one side, while two men loudly debate the cost of a pig across the room. A woman slams her mug so hard that half her drink sloshes out. No one even reacts. Next to you, a man stares off into space with the blank expression of someone either pondering the universe or forgetting what furniture is for. Then someone sneezes nearby, and half the room instinctively leans away. Despite all this, despite the noise, the smells, the complete lack of personal space, there's something oddly welcoming. The tavern is rough and wild, yes, but it's also alive. It's the medieval version of a community center. If you subtract hygiene standards and add way more yelling, you find a seat. It's slightly wet, possibly cursed, but it's yours now. From where you sit, the layout looks like someone flung furniture around during an earthquake and decided it looked good enough. There's no clear design, no cozy booths, no tidy bar setup, just a chaotic sprawl of tables, benches, crates, and barrels used as makeshift chairs. Everything feels either too close or too far away, depending on how many drinks you've had. At the heart of it all is the fire, a big open hearth glowing in the corner, trying its best to heat the room while also contributing generously to the indoor smoke levels. People gather near it for warmth and maybe to feel something like comfort. The lucky ones hog the heat, the rest just drink faster. The bar, if you can even call it that, is a thick plank of wood resting on two barrels, sagging slightly under the weight of overflowing mugs and elbows. Behind it, the tavern keeper is a whirlwind, pouring drinks, barking orders, and glaring at the guy in the back corner who still hasn't paid his tab from last week. There's no menu here. You ask what's available and usually get two choices, ale or shut up and wait. A narrow staircase leads upstairs. It looks like it's been there since the place was built and possibly never cleaned. If you squint, you'll spot a boot hanging from the railing. No one knows if it's decor or a grim little warning. Some taverns have a back room. Could be storage, could be gambling, could be the place people disappear after insulting the barmaid. Best not to wonder. The walls are darkened with candle smoke. The windows are covered in grease-streaked fabric or patches of animal hide. And every surface, tabletops, railings, even the walls, has been worn smooth by years of elbows, muddy boots, and spilled drinks, possibly even a stray chicken or two. Yet through the noise and mess, it somehow works. Everyone seems to know the unspoken rules, where to sit, when to shout, and when it's time to duck. It's not tidy, but it's functional. It has rhythm. And at the center of it all, not wearing a crown but commanding the room nonetheless, is the tavern keeper. They're not just the boss, they're the cook, server, accountant, babysitter, and the final word on any baroom dispute. You don't argue with them, you don't cross them. In this chaotic little kingdom, they rule absolutely. The tavern keeper is the engine that keeps the whole wild mess running. They don't take attitude, they don't explain themselves, and they don't need help remembering who owes what. If it's a man, he's probably shaped like he was built out of oak barrels and angry rhinos, gruff, grizzled, and powered entirely by stubbornness and regret. If it's a woman, and it often is, she's razor-sharp, quick with a glare that could freeze a brawl mid-punch, and tougher than the boiled leather boots nailed to the wall. These are not people you argue with. They've cleaned blood out of straw before most folks have had breakfast. Regulars get a curt nod. Strangers get the kind of side-eye that checks for hidden weapons and unpaid tabs. Start trouble? You'll meet the business end of a tankard before you can say, "I was just kidding." Behind the bar, they keep track of everything with a terrifying mental ledger. Who paid? Who's ducking the tab? Who's had 3 more than they can handle? No paper, no ink, just the kind of steel-trap memory that makes you question whether they sleep with one eye open. Literacy might be rare, but the tavern keeper forgets nothing. The whole mood of the tavern hinges on them. If they're cheerful, the place glows. If they're in a bad mood, you'd better finish your drink quietly and maybe reconsider that joke you were about to tell. They're the law here, the one who breaks up fights, settles cheating accusations, and swings the first chair if things get out of hand. And they know everything. Who's in debt, who's sneaking around, who wrote in under a fake name. If you need gossip, bribe the barkeep. Need to stay safe, sit close. Need a favor? Hope to the gods you didn't break anything last week. Sometimes they have help, a son, a niece, maybe a poor orphan who got folded into the chaos. These pint-sized assistants carry jugs bigger than their heads, scrub the floor, and try not to get trampled by drunks. They don't talk much. They're too busy learning how to survive in the crash course of medieval hospitality. To you, the tavern might feel like a whirlwind of noise and spilled stew. But there's a balance to it, a strange rhythm that holds everything together. And at the center of it all stands the tavern keeper, apron tied tight, holding back the storm with a mug in one hand and a glare sharp enough to slice through tension. Now that you've found a place to sit, damp, shaky, but yours, you're ready for what really matters, the drink. Don't expect a menu. Don't expect clean cups. This is a medieval tavern, not a trendy pub. Let's start with the house staple, ale. It's thick, cloudy, warm, and brewed in a back room that probably also houses a sleeping dog and some questionable barrels. It's unfiltered and unpasteurized with bonus textures, bits of grain, random floaties, and the occasional something that might have been a mustache. There's no ice, no taps, and definitely no expiration dates. You drink it and just hope. Next on offer, mead. It sounds fancy, honey wine, golden and smooth, but don't be fooled. It's sweet, dangerously strong, and depending on who made it, it might taste like heaven or a very specific type of headache. If the tavern keeper brewed it, you're rolling the dice. Nobles, brides, and overly dramatic bards love it, though. Then there's cider, apple-based, sharp, and served in mugs that moonlight as soup bowls. The apples may have been freshly picked or scooped off the ground 3 weeks ago. It's the drink of choice for people who want just enough alcohol to forget the guy next to them smells like goat and shame. Wine exists, but only barely. Unless you're in southern Europe or rubbing elbows with bishops and spice merchants, what you're getting is weak, sour, and served with a side-eye that dares you to complain. Real wine is for people with coin or titles. Everyone else gets whatever was left in the bottom of the jug. And water? Bold choice. Brave even, but dangerous. Boiling it costs fuel, and clean wells aren't exactly common. That's why even kids drink ale, not for fun, but because it's safer than taking a gamble on dying of dysentery before your 8th birthday. Don't expect shot glasses or mixed drinks. You drink whatever you're handed, from cups made of wood, clay, or dented tin. If you're lucky, it's clean. If you're not, it still has stew in it from the night before. Even with all the noise, the smoke, and the general chaos swirling around you, something about this moment feels not terrible. The firelight flickers across the room, your hands are wrapped around a warm bowl of food, and yeah, it's a little murky, but it's hot, it's hearty, and if you don't think too hard about the unidentified floaters, it might even be comforting. This isn't fine dining. It's survival cuisine. You eat because it's there, because it's warm, and because it'll keep you upright through another round of whatever the night throws at you. You've staked out a seat, hopefully one that isn't already claimed by someone's dagger, and now the real show begins. Because the food might be questionable, but the entertainment is constant. A medieval tavern is basically the original version of a social feed. Loud, unpredictable, half-fabricated, and always ready to overshare. To your left, a farmer with a flushed face and a dangerously sloshing mug is launching into a very detailed fourth retelling of the time his cow gave birth sideways. He punctuates the story with a slap to your shoulder like you're his best friend, or at least a better drinking partner than the pig he usually talks to. Across the room, nearly swallowed by the shadows, sits a hooded figure nursing his drink like it might tell him secrets. He could be anything, a disgraced monk, a wandering outlaw, or just incredibly shy. Either way, you don't try to make conversation unless you're hoping to wake up tied to a tree behind the stables. By the hearth, a soldier in dented armor is holding court. His tale involves dragons, a war with the French, and a sword that supposedly talks. None of it sounds even remotely real, but his mug stays full, and the crowd around him is eating it up like gospel. Over near the door, a merchant, sweaty, loud, and way too enthusiastic, is shouting about grain prices to a room that absolutely didn't ask. He flashes gold coins like he's daring someone to rob him before the fire burns out. Spoiler, someone probably will. A pair of locals are locked in a tense dice game on a table that wobbles every time someone leans in too hard. One of them is obviously cheating. The other knows, but lets it slide. There's a certain unspoken agreement. Maybe the fight will happen when the ale's gone, or when the stakes finally feel worth it. And off in the corner, a bard is strumming a lute, singing a love song that sounds suspiciously improvised. His voice cracks, his lyrics wander, and no one really cares. He's in tune, he's got his pants on, and honestly, that's more than most can say tonight. This isn't dinner and a show. This is the show. Every person here is a story, a distraction, or a disaster waiting to happen. And for now, You're right in the middle of it, drinking warm ale, dodging elbows, and soaking up the kind of night you won't remember clearly, but won't forget either. Well, at least this bard's better than the guy from last night. Across the room, women weave through the crowd, some working as tavern staff, others clearly running their own side business. They move with sharp eyes, confident steps, and an energy that says very clearly, mess around and you'll find out. They'll flirt, joke, or break your nose depending entirely on your attitude. No one questions them. No one dares. Kids dart through the chaos now and then, slipping between legs to snatch a crust of bread or the odd coin left too close to the edge of a table. No one stops them. It's part of the rhythm, just another beat in the ongoing song of the tavern. People watch, whisper, drink, and act like they didn't just see a man slump under a table and stop moving. It's not strange. It's just another Thursday. This place isn't just for food and ale. It's a stage, and tonight, whether you planned on it or not, you're one of the players. Forget the bard for a moment. The real soundtrack of the tavern isn't music. It's pure, roaring chaos. It starts with the crash of mugs, some meeting the table in celebration, others flying off and breaking mid-toast. Both outcomes get applause, then comes the laughter. Loud, unpredictable, and completely unhinged. A farmer cracks himself up over a joke about hay. A knight giggles every time someone says pottage. A monk nearly passes out laughing at the word duck. You learn quickly, don't ask why. Voices pile on each other like wrestlers in a pit. Storytellers, drunks, braggarts, and someone in the corner misquoting scripture just to win a bet. The barkeep's shouting orders while swatting flies. A barmaid's yelling at a man who just got too handsy. And somewhere in the back, someone keeps shouting another round, like they're summoning spirits. And in the corner, the bard soldiers on, strumming 4 barely working chords on a lute held together by sheer will and missing strings. He sings about lost love, heroic chickens, or noblemen who wore their trousers backward. Most people tune him out until he starts singing about someone actually in the room. Then suddenly, everyone's listening or ducking. Something always spills. Someone always burps loud enough to rattle the walls. Someone else falls off a bench and just keeps talking from the floor like it's part of the act. In the background, dogs bark. A goat bleats. Yes, there's a goat now. No one knows why. Chairs screech across the dirt floor like thunder. And just when the room quiets, only for a heartbeat, it's broken by an explosive fart, and the entire place roars back to life. This isn't just background noise. It's the tavern's pulse. Loud, raw, and constantly in motion. And if you listen long enough, you start to hear the rhythm beneath the madness. A strange sort of order made entirely from disorder. Like everything else here, it only gets louder the longer you stay. Once the ale kicks in and the stew starts settling, the whole tavern shifts. It's no longer just a place to fill your belly. It becomes a medieval casino, minus the glamour, plus a whole lot more yelling. Gambling takes over. Everyone's in on it, from old mercenaries with missing fingers to barefoot kids with stolen dice. There are no rules, no dealers, no house edge, just a rough table, a pile of coins, and a shared understanding that someone's about to leave broke and furious. Dice are king here. Rough little cubes carved from bone, wood, or whatever was handy. They roll across the tables with loud clatters, followed by cheers, groans, and at least one dramatic accusation of sorcery. No one trusts the dice. Everyone uses them. Cards show up too, especially in towns with a hint of class. They're hand-painted, frayed, often missing a few, and come with rules that change depending on who's winning. One minute you're chasing the highest number, the next you're trying to match symbols, or bluff your way through rules you made up 5 seconds ago. Think poker, but with more shouting, more slapping, and a higher chance of getting stabbed. Wagers here aren't just coins, they're whatever someone's desperate or drunk enough to throw on the table. Mugs, boots, a slightly nicer goat. One guy bet his own freedom for the night. He lost. No one was surprised. The regulars are slick. They shuffle the cards with flair, roll the dice with drama, and flash 2 wide smiles that mean one thing: someone's cheating. But that's half the fun. A hidden die here, a marked card there, a subtle cough when luck leans the wrong way. It's not just tolerated, it's expected. Win big, and you'd better buy a round or risk getting tackled in the alley. Lose hard, and you smile like you meant to, edge your chair back, and inch toward the door. Other games spring up on every side: arm wrestling, thumb wars, and the eternal contest of how much can I drink before collapsing. The winner gets applause. The loser gets dragged under a table to sleep it off, and a headache that'll outlast the week. Even when the rules are made up and the prizes are ridiculous, the whole room is electric. Here, luck isn't just a game. It's a gamble with your purse, your pride, and sometimes even your pants. And as the night stretches on, thick with heat and noise, a different kind of show begins, one built not on dice or mugs, but words. Story time. Medieval style. In the corner, the bard clears his throat and tunes his battered lute, which creaks like a cartwheel in need of grease. He's missing some teeth, sure, but confidence? Not a bit of it. With a dramatic strum, he launches into a tragic, ridiculous tale of a love-struck knight who drowned mid-poem trying to woo a mermaid. No one believes him. Everyone listens. That's how it works here. Truth is optional. Entertainment is everything. Soon, others jump in. Not bards, just regulars fueled by ale and ego. One man claims he fought a bear and lived. Another swears he saw a witch turn a cow into a goat. A third insists he's directly related to Charlemagne, though it gets fuzzy around his mother's cousin's side. Every story begins with, "You're not going to believe this, but..." And they're right, we don't. But we want to. Tall tales turn into tavern lore. Blunders become epics. Someone tells a joke so awful it actually gets a second laugh out of sheer pity. Another recites a poem that may or may not have been copied off a monastery wall. The crowd claps, hoots, or throws bread, whatever feels right in the moment. If you're lucky, a traveling minstrel or professional scold might pass through. These are the real performers. Their songs are smooth, their stories long, and their ability to rile up a room borderline magical. But even they stick to the tavern's golden rule: never let the truth ruin a great story. Because here, wrapped in smoke and firelight, surrounded by sloshing mugs and open mouths, storytelling isn't just a pastime, it's how people bond. It's how enemies become drinking buddies, and strangers become legends. By the time midnight rolls around, half the tavern is loudly reenacting the saga of a one-legged knight who fought off 6 bandits with a soup ladle. And nobody cares if it's real. What matters is how good the tale sounds over ale. Somewhere between the third mead and the second lie, the room shifts again. The air gets heavier, warmer, bolder. The bard is crooning about unfaithful shepherdesses, and suddenly everyone's feeling a little romantic. Welcome to medieval flirting. Subtleties long gone. It starts with eye contact, or at least an attempt at it through the fog of drink. A man with exactly 2 teeth leans across a sticky bench and slurs, "My lady, your beauty burns brighter than the hearth." She doesn't even look up, just lobs a bread crust straight at his forehead. And so, the dance begins. The crowd erupts with laughter as the bread crust hits its mark. Inspired, others take their shot, some more subtle, offering a clumsy compliment or a refilled mug with a smile that's just shy of a wink. A few even try the old, "let me help you carry that stew" move. It still spills. If you're a woman in the room, whether you're staff, a guest, or just passing through on business, you're probably fending off a parade of would-be poets, overly enthusiastic arm wrestlers, and at least one guy trying to balance a knife on his nose to impress you. Every now and then, it actually works. But more often, it ends in disappointment, a bruised ego, or someone walking away with lighter pockets. Of course, not all flirtation is aimless. For those who know how to read the room and profit from it, taverns are ripe with opportunity. Courtesans move through the crowd with practiced grace, already knowing who's got coin, who might be worth the trouble, and who's about to pass out at the table. The deals are discreet. The intent is not. And yes, jealous lovers are a guaranteed feature. It only takes a laugh that lasts too long, a glance held too confidently, or a wandering hand for sparks to turn into fire. Mugs get thrown, tables flip, a bench snaps in half again for the 3rd time this week. And yet, somewhere in the middle of the madness, real connections happen. A baker's daughter and a stonemason share a laugh and a bowl of stew. 2 farmers bond over their shared hatred of turnips. A monk flirts with a nun by accident. It's messy, it's loud, and somehow, it's still kind of romantic. Because love in a medieval tavern isn't about candlelight or sonnets. It's about charm, chance, and managing not to faceplant in your soup while trying to impress someone. You might steal a heart, you might get slapped, Either way, you're going to remember it, or at least be reminded of it by someone else tomorrow. Eventually, the moment arrives. It always does. Maybe someone spilled ale on the wrong boots. Maybe an accusation of dice cheating hit too close to home. Maybe two people decided they both own the same bench. Or maybe someone said something about someone else's mother, goat, or stew. It doesn't matter. Suddenly, the mood shifts. The noise sharpens. A stool goes airborne. A tankard crashes to the floor. Someone yells, "Hold my bread," and hurls themselves over a bench like a catapult powered by bad decisions. This is not a surprise. This is not a disaster. This is tradition. A medieval tavern fight is expected. It's more spectacle than violence, more ridiculous than dangerous. People swing and miss. They trip over their own feet. Someone ends up headfirst in a bowl of stew. Hair gets pulled. Shirts get torn. The tavern keeper, ladle in one hand and club in the other, bellows like a war commander trying to keep order on a battlefield made of spilled ale and broken promises. Some folks join in just for the thrill, no idea what started the fight, but eager to throw a punch anyway. Others stay seated, cheering, laughing, or quietly pushing their mugs just far enough out of reach to avoid splash damage. Actual weapons? Rare. Most people know better. Drawing a blade turns a tavern scuffle into a tavern legend, and legends usually end in a ban and a trip to the graveyard. Eventually, the chaos burns out. Someone hits the floor and doesn't get up. Another crashes into a wall and decides to stay there for a while. The fight fizzles like a candle wick, and just like that, it's over. No long speeches, no grudges, just bruises, busted furniture, and the slow return to normal. Mugs are refilled. Someone starts singing again, and 10 minutes later, everyone's laughing, even the guy bleeding from the nose and missing a shoe. It's not a court of law, it's a tavern. You walk away with a story, a limp, and maybe a new nickname like One-Eyed Arnold or Benchbreaker Bill. Because here a good brawl isn't a disaster. It's just another part of a good night, loud, dumb, and oddly bonding. And so with the fight behind you, the bard snoring mid-ballad, and your stomach full of mystery stew and slightly fermented cider, the night carries on. Not quieter, just warmer. It's late, time to sleep, or at least give it your best shot. Don't expect comfort. There's no feather bed waiting for you, no lavender on the pillow. This is a medieval tavern, not a countryside retreat. If the place has rooms for rent, they're probably up a narrow staircase that groans with every step. The floorboards slope in ways that defy architecture, and the beams hang low enough to remind you how hard your skull is. The rooms themselves? Tiny, drafty, and shared. There's no privacy, just people packed in shoulder to shoulder, snoring like bell towers and mumbling in dialects you've never heard. Technically, there are beds. In reality, they're thin straw mattresses, lumpy, barely stuffed, and crawling with what people back then called companions. You don't undress. You lie down fully clothed, boots still on, dagger under your pillow. Not for comfort, but just in case. Blankets are communal, as are smells. And if someone ate garlic earlier, and someone always did, it's going to haunt your dreams. If you can't afford a room or if you're too drunk to climb the stairs, you make do downstairs. Maybe a bench, maybe the corner by the hearth, maybe under a table with someone's dog pressed against your side. Doesn't matter whose dog. Doesn't matter if it's a dog. You will be stepped on. You will be sneezed on. You may be mistaken for a footrest. And still, somehow, you fall asleep. The tavern never really falls silent. Even when the last tankard's emptied and the last brawl has fizzled out, there's always a voice muttering in sleep, a pop from the fire, or the long, slow groan of someone rolling over into a regrettable position. The occasional echoing fart drifts from the rafters like an invisible ghost of the evening. But the noise becomes comforting. It's messy, human, alive. Eventually you drift off. It's not clean, it's barely warm, but it's safe enough. The fire holds back the cold. The tavern keeper, somehow always awake, keeps one eye on the room and one hand on a club. That constant hum of breathing bodies and flickering flame becomes its own kind of lullaby. When you wake, your neck aches, your mouth feels like it's been sanded, and you've got a mystery bruise you didn't order. But surrounded by strangers, travelers, thieves, drunks, and dreamers. No lords, no luxury, just straw, shared air, and the hope your boots are still nearby. Then dawn creeps in, not softly, but like an annoying cousin poking you in the eye. pale light leaks through the cracks in the shutters, pressing against your eyelids until you give up. The tavern has changed. Not quieter exactly, just drained. Like the whole building is hungover. You crack one eye open. Someone's boot is resting on your chest. Someone else is mumbling about sheep taxes. The bard's curled under a table, still gripping his lute like it's his lost love. A chicken hops across the floor, pecking at stale crusts. No one knows where it came from. No one cares. The fire has burned down to ashes, leaving the room smoky and cold. A few brave souls begin to stir, groaning as though they fought a war in their dreams. One man sits up, looks around, and immediately lies back down. He's made his decision, not today. Meanwhile, the tavern keeper is already moving. Of course they are. Banging mugs together, sweeping the floor into fresh, lumpy piles, reheating something that smells like breakfast and vengeance. They shoot a glance at the bodies still on the floor and slam a ladle against a mug. That's your alarm clock. Up or out. There's no breakfast spread waiting. If you're lucky, there's leftover pottage, thicker, browner, and more mysterious than last night. The bread's reheated, the ale's been watered down, and no one has the energy to complain. Some patrons don't even bother. They just dunk their heads into the rain barrel outside and call it a bath. You check your coin pouch, 2 coins and a button. Honestly, not bad. Your boots are still here. One has a suspicious bite mark, but they're yours. That counts as a win. New faces begin to filter in. Early risers, tired travelers, laborers preparing for a day of livestock, taxes, or even worse, neighbors. The tavern stretches, yawns, and slowly begins to come back to life, like some beast waking from a long, chaotic dream. Someone starts retelling a story from the night before. It's already grown in the retelling. Now there were 2 fights. The bard summoned a ghost, and someone definitely danced with it. Everyone nods along like it's just how things happened. The night was chaos. The morning, groggy, sticky, and heavy with regret. And yet somehow you smile. You made it through. Through the heat, the noise, the sour ale soaked into your boots. Through the flirting, the yelling, the pottage that defied explanation. You might have dodged a flying bench. You might have been under one. But you're still here. And as your body reminds you of everything it endured, a simple truth settles in. The medieval tavern was never just a place to drink. It was the pulse of the town. In a world without phones, without newsprint, without anything close to social media, this was where stories spread and people connected. A merchant just in from the coast might share whispers of a storm in a distant port. A soldier could recount battles from the front lines, or invent a few for dramatic effect. A bard sang songs that tied people together, even if the lyrics changed nightly and the chorus was mostly guesswork. This was the gathering ground, where a farmer might share a table with a blacksmith, a monk with a runaway thief. Pilgrims traded tales with locals. Strangers became friends, or at least companions for one more round. In here, social lines blurred. Deals were made, grudges formed or forgotten. A roll of the dice could start a feud or end one. The tavern was also where life happened. Business was done over cracked mugs. Agreements sealed with handshakes, sticky with cider. You could gain a job, lose your coin, find a partner, or insult the wrong person, all within the same hour. And through it all, the tavern gave something precious: relief. Relief from cold nights and harder days. Relief from plowing frozen fields, from hauling stone, from prayers that felt unanswered. Here, near the hearth, you could hear a bad joke, sing a worse song, and forget, just briefly, how difficult the world was. Even if the food was chewy, the drink warm, and the straw bed made you itch in places you didn't know could itch, it was still a place where people felt alive. In an age when war, famine, disease, or a harsh winter could wipe out an entire village without warning, the chance to sit near a fire and laugh was nothing short of sacred. So when someone bought a drink in a tavern, they weren't just buying ale. They were buying belonging, a story, a night of being part of something. Maybe even a corner of floor where the fire still burned. Because long before there were cafes and pubs, coffee houses and bars, there was the tavern, loud, filthy, honest, and unforgettable. Before she became the most recognized face of ancient Egypt, frozen in time with elegant cheekbones and that famously serene gaze, Nefertiti was something more elusive, a mystery. Her name means the beautiful one has come, but where she came from is still debated. Some believe she was born into Egyptian nobility, possibly the daughter of a high-ranking official named A, maybe even the sister of Akhenaten himself. Others think she was a foreign princess, sent to Egypt in a political alliance. Her true origins are lost to time, but her impact is undeniable. Nefertiti didn't step quietly into the historical record. She exploded into it. When she entered Akhenaten's life, she didn't come as a background figure or decorative queen. She was his partner in revolution. Together they upended centuries of Egyptian belief. They threw out the pantheon of gods, abandoned temples that had stood for generations, and declared the sun disk, the Aten, the one true deity. It was radical. It was nearly heretical. And Nefertiti wasn't sitting quietly on the sidelines while it happened. She was leading ceremonies, making offerings, and uniquely, being shown in royal art performing acts of power, usually reserved for pharaohs alone. She's even shown smiting enemies, something traditionally depicted only with kings. Unlike the many queens before her who were pushed into the background, Nefertiti dominated the visual landscape of the Amarna period. More than Akhenaten himself, it's her image that endures, regal, present, commanding, never cloaked in submission, always unmistakably a force in her own right. She stands tall in the artwork of her time, sometimes even larger than the king himself, holding symbols of power as if they belonged to her alone. In a world where pharaohs were considered gods on earth, her constant presence beside Akhenaten wasn't just symbolic, it hinted at something deeper. Maybe she wasn't just a queen, maybe she was a co-ruler. But rising to that level came with backlash. Egypt wasn't ready. The old priesthood, who had long held sway through the worship of traditional gods like Amun, saw their power vanish. Temples were closed, rituals erased, and the capital itself was uprooted, moved to a brand new city, Akhetaten, modern-day Amarna, where the sun would rise in perfect alignment with the landscape, bathing the city in Aten's light. And through every bold move, Nefertiti was there. Her face carved into walls, her name sung in hymns to the sun. In life, she was everywhere, and then, nothing. No tomb, no body, no clear end. History, after showcasing her brilliance, abruptly turns its gaze away. That's where her legend begins. To understand how she rose, you need to know the man who made it all possible, Akhenaten. He wasn't born with that name. He started life as Amenhotep IV, heir to a dynasty grounded in nearly 1,000 years of worshipping a vast pantheon of gods. But something changed in him. Some call it divine inspiration, others call it madness. When he became king, he defied tradition. He turned away from Amun, the supreme god of the time, and declared a radical new truth. There was only one true god, the sun itself, the Aten. This wasn't just a religious shift, it was a seismic shock that rattled the foundations of Egyptian life. Temples to Amun were shut down. The god's name was chipped off monuments, statues were destroyed, whole cities emptied. In their place, Akhenaten built his dream, a new city, Akhetaten, devoted entirely to the Aten, where the morning sun would rise between the cliffs and light the city in sacred brilliance. And through it all, Nefertiti wasn't a silent partner. She stood beside him, performing rituals, making offerings, worshipping the Aten with as much authority as Akhenaten himself. Their daughters were always shown with them, gathered under the rays of the sun like divine witnesses to their parents' devotion. Even the art changed. Gone were the rigid poses of old. In their place, fluidity, exaggeration, intimacy. The royal couple is shown touching, kissing, playing with their children. Their humanity was part of their divinity. Nefertiti was everywhere in this new visual and spiritual world. Sometimes she even seemed to take center stage. Some believe she ruled as co-regent under the name Neferneferuaten, a sign that her authority extended beyond mere symbolism. Was it love that made Akhenaten share the throne? Strategy? Necessity? We don't know, but one thing is clear. Without Nefertiti, this revolution might have collapsed much sooner. Because revolutions are delicate things. The gods don't like being erased, and neither do the people who worship them. Behind the murals and prayers, the old world was quietly waiting. By the height of her power, Nefertiti had become something more than a queen. She was an icon, not just of beauty, but of divine femininity, of sovereign strength. Egypt had seen powerful queens before, Amos Nefertari Hatshepsut, but Nefertiti's power felt different. She didn't seize control through conquest or rule in secret. She helped remake religion and culture side by side with her husband. She was transformation made flesh. She bore Akhenaten 6 daughters, Meritin, Meketaten, Ankesenpaten, later known as Ankesanamen, Neferneferuat Tasherit, Neferneferur, and Setapenre, all of whom appear in art, clustered beneath the outstretched arms of the Aten, the sun's rays ending in tiny hands, blessing the royal family. Together they created a world unlike anything Egypt had seen, and when it ended, the world moved on. But Nefertiti, despite vanishing from the historical record, never really disappeared. She became something rarer than a queen or even a co-pharaoh. She became a myth. Strangely, no sons were ever officially confirmed for Nefertiti. In a kingdom obsessed with bloodlines and succession, this was both a political problem and a historical riddle. Was it just fate? Or was something more complicated happening behind palace walls? Some historians speculate that Akhenaten may have had sons with other wives, possibly secondary queens. Others go further, proposing far more controversial ideas, including the possibility of children with Nefertiti herself, fueling modern debates that swing between the scholarly and the scandalous. What we do know is that motherhood was central to Nefertiti's public image. She is frequently depicted in tender, intimate scenes, cradling her daughters, with tiny hands reaching up to touch her cheeks, their family bathed in sunlight. These weren't the stiff, formal poses typical of Egyptian art. These were snapshots of life, warm, human, emotionally charged. In an era where the pharaoh was portrayed as a distant god, Nefertiti's role as a nurturing mother made the divine feel closer, more real. But that wasn't the whole picture. Nefertiti was also shown in positions of unmistakable authority. She wore the blue crown of pharaohs, a symbol traditionally reserved for male rulers. She's seen riding chariots, smiting enemies, and leading worship without Akhenaten present. These weren't symbolic stand-ins. These were depictions of a woman exercising real power. It hints at something deeper. Perhaps she wasn't just a partner in Akhenaten's reign. Perhaps she was preparing to rule alone. There are whispers, fragments in the historical record, that suggest her influence only grew as Akhenaten's health declined, possibly due to genetic illness or mounting political pressure. It's likely she took on more of the burden of leadership. But then, without warning, she vanishes. No fanfare, no funeral inscription, no tomb, no confirmed burial. A woman so central to one of Egypt's most radical religious and cultural revolutions simply disappears. And that mystery, her vanishing, is where legend begins to blur with possibility. One day, Nefertiti is everywhere, carved into walls, praised in hymns, seen at her husband's side and in her own right. Then, somewhere around the 12th year of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, the records go quiet. Her name stops appearing in inscriptions. Her image fades from temple walls. No announcement, no mourning ceremony, nothing. For a queen depicted as divine, such an exit is more than strange. It's a black hole in history. One theory offers the simplest explanation. She died. Possibly in childbirth, which remained a deadly risk even for royalty. Around this same time, her second daughter, Meketaten, also vanishes from the records. A tragic double loss, a mother and daughter gone in the same moment, could explain it. But if so, where are the tributes? The tombs? The temples? A woman honored like a goddess wouldn't simply fade into the background of history. That's why other theories gain traction. Maybe it wasn't death. Maybe it was politics. The tides may have shifted at court. Akhenaten, increasingly isolated and surrounded by religious turmoil, could have removed her from power, voluntarily or otherwise. Perhaps a new consort rose in her place. Some scholars point to a mysterious co-ruler who appears late in Akhenaten's reign, a figure known as Smenkhkare. Who was this person? A brother? A son? A rival? Or, most intriguingly, was it Nefertiti herself, ruling under a new name? That theory has set historians buzzing. In the final years of Akhenaten's reign, an individual named Neferneferuoten emerges in the records, possibly the same person as Smenkhkare. This figure used feminine language in inscriptions, referred to Akhenaten as her beloved husband, and exercised power in ways remarkably similar to Nefertiti's earlier role. It raises a thrilling possibility. Nefertiti didn't disappear. She transformed. If that's true, then Nefertiti may have ended her reign not as queen but as pharaoh, one of the rare women in Egyptian history to rule outright like Hatshepsut before her. She may have changed her name, donned full royal regalia, and taken the throne in her own right, guiding Egypt through the final flickering years of the Aten experiment. It's impossible to say for certain. The records are incomplete, the names sometimes blurred or interchanged, but the clues are there, scattered like broken pieces of a statue waiting to be put together. Whether she died, was erased, or became something greater, one thing remains clear. Nefertiti was never just a queen. She was a presence, a force. And the fact that we are still searching for her thousands of years later means that, in her own way, she never truly vanished at all. But even the theory of Nefertiti's secret reign, as Neferneferuaten or Smenkhare, begins to crumble like sun-baked stone. Whoever she was in those final years, queen, pharaoh, or something in between, her rule ends as abruptly as it may have begun. Then, a more familiar name rises from the desert sands, Tutankhaten, later changed to Tutankhamun, the boy king. Barely old enough to hold a scepter, suddenly placed on the throne of a fractured empire. He would go on to become the most famous pharaoh in the world, not for his deeds in life, but for what was found in death, an untouched tomb bursting with gold and mystery. But for all the glitter, the real question is more human, more haunting. Who was his mother? Historical records go eerily quiet. His father was almost certainly Akhenaten, but the identity of his mother remains a fog of silence and conflicting clues. Some say Nefertiti was his stepmother, married to his father but not his birth mother. Others argue she was his mother, pointing to the art, the timeline, and the lingering presence of a young boy in depictions from her final appearances. If Nefertiti truly bore Tutankhamun, it would explain much. His early reign, while short, was clearly guided by a seasoned hand. The reversal of his father's radical religious reforms, the restoration of the old gods, the return of temples, the erasure of Aten's dominance, was no accident and almost certainly not the work of a 9-year-old child. So who was behind the throne? Someone was pulling the strings. Someone who knew how to navigate court politics, manage priestly alliances, control public symbolism, and calm a nation shaken by spiritual upheaval. Could it have been Nefertiti, operating in the shadows? Or perhaps I, her possible father, high priest and future pharaoh in his own right? Or both, working together to quietly dismantle the Amarna revolution and restore order? One of the most compelling pieces of evidence lies in the boy king's own tomb. Among its treasures was a golden shrine that shows a woman anointing the young Tutankhamun, a gesture of divine blessing, authority, and care. Her face bears the unmistakable features seen so often in earlier depictions of Nefertiti. If that was her, then she didn't vanish. She adapted. She survived. She remained at the heart of power, even if her name was left behind. But without a named tomb, a confirmed mummy, or a single intact monument to mark her end, we are left with only whispers. If she guided Tutankhamun, her influence is everywhere. But her name is not. It was erased from temple walls, left off royal lists, scrubbed from the record, as though someone had tried, very deliberately, to make the world forget a woman who once ruled like a god. And yet the irony could not be more complete. Tutankhamun's global fame, his golden mask, his treasures, his myth, would resurrect the memory of Nefertiti. In the frantic search for his story, the world stumbled into hers. The queen who had once ruled beside a revolutionary pharaoh, the woman who may have ruled alone, the mother or stepmother of a boy who would undo it all. For someone who stood at the center of one of Egypt's most transformative eras, Nefertiti left behind no confirmed resting place, not a single sarcophagus, no tomb with her name intact, no funerary inscription to speak her last words to the gods. It's as though she vanished into legend, not dust. In a civilization built around the afterlife, where even minor nobles were mummified, entombed, and sent off with scrolls of prayers, Nefertiti's absence is a gaping void. Egyptologists have wrestled with this mystery for more than a century. How could one of the most powerful, visible, beloved women in Egyptian history disappear so completely? Some believe she was buried quickly and without ceremony as the Amarna period collapsed. Others argue her legacy became too dangerous, too tightly tied to Akhenaten's heresy. Her tomb may have been destroyed, her monuments defaced, her memory deliberately erased as part of the great campaign to restore the old gods and forget the revolution that nearly unmade Egypt. And yet she endures. In busts, in hymns, in fragments of stone and broken reliefs. in the shadows of her husband's rule and the uncertain light of her own. Nefertiti remains one of history's most haunting absences, not just because of what we don't know, but because of what we almost know. She is the missing queen, the forgotten ruler, the woman who may have worn the crown of a king and vanished just before the world was ready to remember her. In the end, the return to Egypt's traditional gods was swift and merciless. Vengeance came not in swords, but in stone, in chisels and hammers that struck heresy from the record. Names were scraped off monuments, images were destroyed, whole lives were rewritten in hieroglyphs. Nefertiti's legacy, tied so closely to the radical reign of Akhenaten, was one of the first to vanish. But perhaps it wasn't erased, just hidden. One of the most tantalizing theories suggests her tomb was never truly lost at all. It may have been misidentified or cleverly concealed. In 2015, radar scans of KV-62 Tutankhamun's now famous tomb revealed possible hidden chambers behind its walls. The idea electrified the world. Could Nefertiti be resting just inches away, sealed behind layers of stone and silence? Egyptologists and the global public held their breath. For a moment it felt like she might finally step back into the light, but follow-up scans were inconclusive. Excavations slowed, funding faded, the excitement dulled, and once again, Nefertiti slipped back into myth. And yet her absence refuses to be quiet. We don't have her tomb, we don't have her body, but we have her face, dozens of times captured in stone, in pigment, in relief. Most famously, we have her. The bust. Limestone, painted half-finished, but wholly unforgettable. Since its rediscovery in 1912, Nefertiti's sculpted likeness has stared across a century of museum glass, her gaze locked in quiet defiance or knowing grace, depending on the viewer. She lives now behind soft lighting in Berlin's Neues Museum, her blue crown as vivid as ever, her one finished eye piercingly alive. She doesn't need words. She looks like she knows everything. The bust was uncovered by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt in the ruined studio of Thutmose, Akhenaten's official sculptor. When he brushed the dust away and revealed her features, he didn't try to describe what he saw. In his journal, he simply wrote, "No use describing it, you have to see it." And the world has, over and over again. Through that sculpture, Nefertiti became something more than a queen. She became a symbol, a face of beauty, power, and mystery. And like everything in her story, even the bust is tangled in controversy. Germany acquired it during a time when antiquities laws were loose and colonialism was common. Egypt has long called for her return, insisting she belongs at home, under the same sun whose rays once kissed her skin. Germany has refused. They say she is too fragile to move. Others whisper it's not about fragility. It's about pride, prestige, and the crowds she draws. She is, after all, their Mona Lisa. But no matter where she stands, Nefertiti's presence continues to shape how we see ancient women. She wasn't a passive consort. Her likeness doesn't whisper, it commands. There's something regal, assertive, even challenging in her silence. This was a woman who held power, made decisions, shifted empires, and she still does. It's extraordinary how a single sculpture, silent, cracked, and incomplete, can bring back a voice nearly lost to time. We may never find her tomb. We may never know how she died, or whether she ruled as king. But Nefertiti has already achieved something greater than a grand burial or golden mask. She became immortal, not in stone alone, but in memory. The face remains still, but the story it tells speaks louder with each passing year. Nefertiti's legacy lives in the space between stone and silence, between what we know and what we hope to find. And in that space, she is still waiting, still watching, still reminding us that mystery is its own kind of power. Few figures from the ancient world have stirred as much fascination or raised as many questions as Nefertiti. She is a paradox, one of the most represented women of her time, and yet still one of its greatest mysteries. Across centuries, she's been imagined as many things. To some, she was divine beauty incarnate, a goddess in human form. To others, a cunning political strategist, the true power behind Akhenaten's throne, or perhaps the one sitting on it. Some see her as a romantic figure, swallowed by revolution. Others portray her as ambitious, even ruthless, guiding a crumbling empire with elegance and precision. But what do we actually know? We know she was far more than a royal wife. Her image appears more often than most kings. In religious ceremonies, royal processions, and even scenes of battle, She isn't standing beside power, she's wielding it. In a male-dominated world, she didn't seize the stage by force. She took it through sheer presence, through command of image, symbol, and ritual. She made herself impossible to ignore. We know she was central to one of the boldest religious upheavals in human history. Akhenaten may have conceived the monotheistic cult of the Aten, but it was Nefertiti who gave it form. She was the face between the god and the people, a bridge between the divine and the mortal. In imagery, she doesn't just serve the gods, she becomes them, and we know that when her world fell, so did her name. The backlash against Akhenaten's religious revolution swept Nefertiti into silence. Her statues were shattered, her inscriptions were chiseled out, her memory deliberately buried. But erasure doesn't always work. Sometimes it does the opposite. Because here we are, over 3,000 years later, still speaking her name. Why? Because myths endure where facts fail. Because when a woman becomes both an icon and an enigma, she enters a space beyond history, where time can't quite reach her. The absence of answers becomes a presence in itself. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Nefertiti wanted. Not to be explained, but to be remembered. Not to be pinned down, but to be imagined. Not to be buried, but to live forever as a queen of endless speculation. More than 3 millennia have passed since Nefertiti last walked beneath Egypt's sun, but her shadow still stretches across our world. She peers through museum glass. She lingers in the pages of books, in the frames of documentaries, in academic debates and fashion editorials alike. While other names grow dim with age, hers grows brighter. It's not just her beauty, though that's part of it. We've seen beauty before. What grips us is the mystery. The blank spaces in her story feel intentional, almost like a challenge, as if she's still watching, daring us to try and understand her, fully aware that we never really will. And so, generation after generation reshapes her. To early 20th century Europe, she was the exotic queen, mysterious, silent, passive. Later, she was reclaimed as a feminist icon, an ancient ruler erased by patriarchy. In modern times, she's been reimagined as an African queen, a political genius, a fashion legend, a possible pharaoh. She's lived 1,000 afterlives, not in fact, but in imagination. And maybe that's the truest afterlife of all. In ancient Egypt, immortality wasn't just about preserving a body, it was about preserving a name. If your story was told, if your face was remembered, if your name was spoken, you lived on. You walked the field of reeds. You dined with the gods. You existed beyond death. By that measure, Nefertiti has achieved something greater than a tomb or a sarcophagus. She has become eternal. Her name is spoken in dozens of languages, across continents, across centuries. Her image is seen by millions each year. Her story, unfinished, uncertain, unforgettable, lives on. And in that story, somewhere between stone and silence, between what we know and what we dream, Nefertiti remains. Her face is one of the most recognized in human history, poised, symmetrical, eternal. Her story, though fractured and shadowed, continues to captivate. And perhaps in the end, her greatest legacy wasn't something buried in a golden tomb or sealed behind stone. It was this, the enduring mystery she left behind. Nefertiti's power wasn't only in how she ruled, or how she worshipped, or even how she vanished. It was in the space she left for curiosity, a life half seen, half erased, and yet completely unforgettable. Maybe that was her final, deliberate act of sovereignty, not just to reign over an empire, but to become timeless. Not simply to be remembered, but to never be entirely understood. Nefertiti, the beautiful one who has come, never truly went. She lingers in every question we ask, in every statue we try to reconstruct, every inscription we try to decode. She lives in our need to find the women history tried to forget. She exists not in gold, not in grandeur, but in the very act of being searched for. And what could be more immortal than that? In China, where the clouds hang low and the wind whispers through bamboo groves, a dragon lies sleeping. Not a creature of legend or fire, but of earth, water, and human hands. This dragon is not imagined. It is carved. They call it the dragon's backbone. The Longji rice terraces, rippling across the mountains like scales, layered with water, seeded with rice, and shimmering with the quiet pride of centuries. From afar, the hills move with the rhythm of a living thing. Curves swell and sink with the elegance of breath. But step closer, and the landscape reveals something deeper: life. Water glides through narrow channels, whispering along the earth. Seedlings sway in the breeze. At dawn, mist drapes over the ridges like steam from the nostrils of a slumbering beast. This wasn't built overnight. It began over 700 years ago when the Zhuang and Yao peoples, ethnic minorities bound to the mountains, chose not to leave the slopes behind, but to reshape them. Flat land was rare. Machines didn't exist. So they asked a question born of survival and vision. How do we live here? And they answered slowly. With bamboo baskets and stone tools, they carved. Inch by inch, year by year. Every terrace was a conversation with the mountain. Every layer a lesson in patience. They didn't fight the earth, they taught it to breathe with them. They transformed rainfall into resource, turned gravity into harvest. In time, the terraces took the shape of a dragon, resting, watching, eternal. This was never just farming. It was harmony, a pact between humans and the land. Nothing wasted, nothing forced. The mountain wasn't conquered, it was understood. And today, the dragon's backbone still feeds villages, still holds water, still cradles rice. But more than that, it teaches us something we've almost forgotten, what patience can build. In a world obsessed with speed, here lies a dragon no one chased. It was formed instead, slowly, layer by layer, dream by dream. To walk among the Longji terraces is to enter a landscape not shaped by machines, but by memory. There are no blueprints here, no GPS marks, just the fingerprints of human endurance. Every curve, every stone, every drop of water arranged by people who knew the heartbeat of the land. When the Zhuang and Yao first gazed upon those steep, unforgiving hillsides, they didn't see hardship. They saw a chance. The valleys were taken, the easy soil already tilled, but up here amid rock and mist and stubborn slopes, they saw possibility. They began with nothing but wooden spades and woven baskets, mud and rubble carried on backs weathered by time, and in return the mountain listened. It still does. Slowly, the terraces took shape, horizontal veins carved across the mountain's vast body, each one held in place by walls of carefully stacked stone. These weren't random cuts. They were deliberate, mathematical without the math. Every level had to strike the perfect balance, sloped just enough to carry water forward, but not so much that it would race away. Too steep, and the water would vanish before it could soak in. Too flat, and it would sit and spoil. So the builders didn't measure with tools. They measured with memory. Children learned from elders. Elders learned from the mountain. The slopes were read like scripture, watched through rainfall, planting cycles, shifting clouds. In time, the mountain yielded, not out of defeat, but out of mutual trust. And the result? A landscape that flows with nature by appearing to defy it. From the base of the valley to the mist-wrapped peaks, the terraces ascend like a spiral staircase toward the sky. They echo the contours of the land with such grace it's easy to believe the mountain grew them on its own. But it didn't. These lines, these curves, this breathing sculpture, it was all made by hand. No engines, no cement, no formal plans. Just time, repetition, and the quiet conviction that even the steepest land can sustain life if you're patient enough. Today, these terraces are still alive, still planted, still repaired when the walls shift or the rains run too hard. Not out of nostalgia, but because they work. No shortcuts, no bulldozers, just the old ways, proving with every harvest that tradition, when rooted deeply enough, can outlast machines, storms, and even time. If the dragon's backbone is the skeleton, then water is its soul. It flows silently, elegantly, with no pipes, no power. At the mountain's summit, rainfall and springs feed into narrow ditches and handmade channels. From there, gravity does the rest, pulling water down, terrace by terrace, field by field, in a quiet ancient dance of sustenance. This system isn't accidental. It's a masterpiece of hydraulic logic. Water fills a paddy, lingers just long enough, then spills into the next, nourishing each layer without waste. There are no valves or switches, just simple wooden gates and stone dams, adjusted by hand, guided by feel and instinct. If one paddy floods, the next might drown. If one leaks, others suffer. So the villagers walk the ridges daily, listening not just with ears, but with generations of inherited intuition. Farming here is less an act of control and more an act of harmony. It's not unlike music. One wrong note, one misstep, and the rhythm breaks. But water does more than grow rice. It turns the mountain into a mirror. In spring, when the terraces are first flooded, they become pools of still water, glassy surfaces that reflect the sky. Clouds drift across the fields, stars shimmer in their depths on clear nights. Visitors describe it as otherworldly, as if the mountain has stopped being land and become something sacred, a place where earth and sky meet. Then comes summer. The water thickens with green as rice shoots rise. The reflections fade, replaced by movement, wind through stalks, soft waves of emerald shifting across the hills. Autumn paints the terraces gold. The rice ripens, the water catches the light, and the entire mountain seems to glow. And in winter, when the work pauses, snow settles in. The water stills. The dragon sleeps, but its veins remain, quiet, waiting, ready to flow again. Time moves differently here. Not by clocks, but by signs. The first trickle of meltwater, the return of frogs, the scent of damp soil. While the rest of the world races ahead in seconds and minutes, the people of Longji still live by moisture and season, by rain and root. Here the dragon breathes not with flame, but with water. And every ripple through its hand-shaped body is a reminder, not just of what was built, but how it was built, with care, with patience, with the belief that nature doesn't need to be conquered, only understood. The dragon stirs, and with it, the people rise, not to fanfare, but to ritual. It begins in silence, in soft footsteps and the hush of mist wrapping around the mountain. This is the moment that ties them to every generation before, the planting of the first seed. There are no trumpets, no declarations, only quiet movement. Farmers, both young and old, step out onto the narrow ridges, straw hats tilted low, baskets of seedlings balanced on their backs. The mountain air is thick with the scent of wet soil and morning wind. The flooded terraces glisten like polished jade beneath their feet. This is no place for machines. It never has been. Each rice seedling, first grown in nursery beds, is placed by hand into the waiting mud, one by one, line by line. The farmers wade into the cold water, pressing each stalk down with fingers as practiced as they are gentle. It's a rhythm that's less like work and more like worship. Back bent, arm extended, hand press, step, repeat. All day, sometimes for weeks. Children trail behind, splashing in the shallows, learning the rhythm without needing to be told. They don't study it in books. They learn it through their feet, their fingertips, through the quiet observations passed from hands to hands. This is how knowledge survives here, lived, not spoken. Planting is more than labor. It is a promise, a ceremony. Offerings are left for the mountain spirits. Songs rise over the fields, some centuries old. In certain villages, elders scatter the first seedlings across the water like a blessing, marking the beginning of another growing season. Each field planted is a vow to the ancestors who carved the terraces, to the mountain that sustains them, to the children who will someday stand in this very water. There's no rush, no urgency. No one races the dragon. The pace is deliberate, meditative. The act of planting becomes a kind of devotion, a slow dance of human hands and living earth. And as the days stretch on, tiny green shoots begin to rise like whispers breaking the surface. From this moment, the terraces breathe again, not just with rice, but with hope. Each seed is a quiet rebellion against hunger, each row a slow prayer against the haste of the modern world. And so the cycle begins once more, not with noise or speed, but with hands in mud and eyes lifted to the sky. The dragon is awake, the mountain breathes, the future is planted, one seed at a time. Scattered along the ridgelines and nestled in the folds of the terraces are the heartbeats of the dragon's body, villages like Ping'an, Dajai, and Jinkeng. These are not just clusters of homes. They are living museums of heritage, where every stilted house and narrow path clings to the mountainside like a memory that refuses to fade. Built from timber and lifted on stilts to guard against the rains, the houses blend with the mountain. Their dark, sloping roofs mirror the curves of the terraces they overlook. From above, the villages resemble wooden lanterns adrift on a sea of green. Inside, life is simple and deeply shared. Generations live under one roof. Meals are cooked over wood fires. The scent of bamboo smoke and steaming rice wine curls through the open air. There is no separation between the house and the hill. One leans on the other. One breathes with the other. The people here belong to ethnic minorities, the Zhuang and the Red Yao, each with their own languages, customs, and legends. You can recognize the Yao women at once. Their hair, long and never cut since childhood, is coiled into intricate shapes atop their heads. Sometimes they let it fall freely when bathing in the river. an image so graceful it feels more like folklore than life. Though modernity has slowly crept up the mountain trails, power lines, concrete paths, tourists with cameras, the old ways still hold. Clothes are handwoven, dyed in rich indigo, wooden looms creak gently in shaded rooms. Music from reed pipes and bronze drums echoes through the valleys during festivals. Weddings are still marked by ritual dances, and the harvest is still greeted with song. Hospitality here is not an industry, it's instinct. Guests are welcomed with mountain tea brewed from fragrant local leaves, rice wine served in carved gourds, and stories told by elders who remember the mountain before electricity hummed through the air. They speak of mist-draped dragons, of ancestors who first carved these hills, of spirits who still guard the terraces. And whether myth or memory, you begin to understand that these stories are part of the soil now. Just like the rice, just like the water, just like the people. This is not a place built for spectacle. It is a place built on endurance, on rhythm, on respect. And like the terraces themselves, the villages endure, not because they resist the world, but because they remember how to live with it. And though tourism now brings visitors from every corner of the world, the rhythm of village life continues, largely undisturbed. The rice still grows, the rituals still mark the seasons. The terraces, like the people, endure not by resisting change, but by absorbing it, slowly, carefully, like water descending one level at a time. Here, within the dragon's coils, life is not rushed, it flows, it echoes, it remembers. To walk the terraces of Longji is to walk through layers of myth. The hills are not just soil and stone, they're alive with stories, whispered through bamboo groves and carried on the wind. For the villagers, these mountains are not merely land. They are sacred beings shaped by gods, guarded by spirits, and inhabited by tales passed from one generation to the next. The most enduring legend speaks of a sleeping dragon whose body stretches across the ridges. Its spine rises in coils, the very terraces themselves. Locals believe the curves of the mountain are not man-made, but rather the dragon's scales, rising and falling with breath. When mist rolls in from the valley and covers the paddies in white, it's said the dragon stirs, breathing gently in its sleep. Another tale tells how the terraces were born from divine generosity. In a time of famine, the ancestors climbed the mountains and prayed to the heavens. Moved by their devotion, the gods sent rain and instructed them to carve the hills into steps so rice could grow. The people obeyed, and the dragon appeared to guide their hands. Ever since, they've honored the mountain with respect, never shouting in the fields, never cutting trees without prayer. These beliefs are not written in books. They live in songs sung during planting, in incense burned before a new growing season, in the silence kept during misty mornings. Children grow up hearing these tales, not as fantasy, but as truth embedded in the land. To laugh at the dragon is to risk a bad harvest. To disrespect the spirits is to invite flood or drought. There are spirits in the water too. Some farmers still make offerings before releasing the spring water into the terraces for the first time each year. A few drops of rice wine, a prayer murmured under breath. Not for show, just tradition, as natural as tying a shoe. And whether you believe in dragons or not, something sacred hangs in the air. Maybe it's the silence, maybe it's the clouds, or maybe it's the quiet certainty that this place is more than human work. It's a story still being told, written not in ink, but in stone, water, and rice. For centuries, the dragon's backbone was a secret kept by the mountains, remote, quiet, and known only to those who called it home. But no place, no matter how sacred, remains untouched forever. The road came, the wires followed. Tourists, cameras, and smartphones climbed the hills alongside the farmers, and the terraces, ancient and weathered, faced a question they'd never had to answer before. How do you survive the modern world? At first, there was worry. Some feared the mountain would be sold piece by piece to developers, that concrete would replace wood, that culture would become costume. But the people of Longji didn't just endure, they adapted, not by abandoning the past, but by weaving the present into it, one careful thread at a time. Villagers began opening their homes to guests, not as resorts, but as family stays. Visitors eat local meals, sticky rice steamed in bamboo, wild greens picked that morning. They sleep in wooden stilt houses where roosters still announce the sunrise. The experience isn't curated for show. It's lived, honest, real. And the farming? It continues. Each season, locals still flood the terraces, still plant by hand, still harvest with sickles worn smooth by time. Children attend school by day but help in the fields at dusk. Tourism may bring income, but rice brings life. One supports the other. Both are essential. Some young villagers have left for the cities, but many return. There is something magnetic about the terraces, something deeper than nostalgia. It's the sound of water sliding through the channels, the way the stars reflect in the paddies, the way the mountains teach patience. Local festivals have grown louder. Yes, there are now microphones where there were once drums, signs in Mandarin and English beside sacred springs. But the rituals still happen. Offerings are still made. Elders still lead the songs. The dragon's backbone didn't resist change. It absorbed it with grace, with balance. The terraces remain not because they are frozen in time, but because they breathe with time, flexing, adjusting, but never breaking. In an age where tradition is often sacrificed for progress, Longji stands as quiet proof that progress can walk gently if it chooses, that the old ways still have room in the modern world, especially when they are this beautiful. The dragon's backbone is never the same place twice. With each season, it sheds its skin, transforms its colors, shifts its mood. While cities change in years, the terraces change in weeks, draped not just in light, but in rhythm. To stand among them through a full year is to witness a mountain breathe. Spring arrives like a mirror. The terraces are flooded in preparation for planting, and the still water reflects the sky like silver glass. Clouds drift not just above, but below your feet. Visitors speak of walking through heaven. The fields look empty, but they're full of potential. Beneath the surface, life is stirring. Summer brings a burst of green. The rice shoots stretch tall and straight, blanketing the hills in an emerald cascade. From a distance, the terraces look like ribbons of velvet rolling in every direction. The air is warm and wet. Frogs call from the paddies. Farmers, knee-deep in water, work from dawn till dusk, their hats bobbing like tiny sails on a jade sea. Autumn is gold, harvest time. The rice matures and the terraces catch fire in the sunlight, glowing with grain. The fields ripple in the wind and drums echo through the villages. Families gather, songs are sung, sticky rice is cooked. It's not just a season, it's a celebration. The dragon, fully awake, offers its bounty. Winter draws the mountain into stillness. The terraces are empty. The water drains. Snow sometimes falls, dusting the steps in soft white. Other times frost clings to the walls like lace. There are no tools in the field, no voices, only silence. The dragon sleeps, resting, waiting. Each season writes a different poem. Spring reflects, summer grows, autumn feeds, winter rests. The beauty of Longji isn't just in its shape, but in its cycle, in how it accepts time without resistance, in how it transforms quietly, never needing to announce itself. Photographers chase the light here, hoping to capture something eternal. But the terraces don't freeze for anyone. They move, they breathe. They teach us softly that beauty is not static. It's a rhythm, a practice, a promise renewed with every season. And so the dragon turns again, not with roar or flame, but with water, grain, and wind. In the end, the terraces are more than fields. They are a vow, quiet, curved, and carved into the mountainside. A promise passed down from hand to hand, season to season, generation to generation. The dragon's backbone is not just a wonder of agriculture or a masterpiece of engineering. It is the story of what happens when humans choose to live with the land, not against it. There were easier paths. The ancestors of Longji could have moved to valleys, chased flatter ground, but they stayed. They studied the slope, listened to the stone, followed the water, and in doing so, they made the impossible ordinary, feeding villages on a mountainside. Every curve holds a lesson, not just about rice, but about patience, about legacy, about care. These terraces weren't built in years or even decades. They took centuries. There is no shortcut to harmony, no machine that can replicate the knowledge etched into each stone wall by calloused hands and quiet persistence. And yet nothing about them is frozen. The terraces are alive. They evolve. They bend with the weather, with the needs of the people, with the shape of the world. That's their secret. They were never rigid. They were always fluid. Even now, as the modern world climbs the hills with its signals and screens, the terraces remain grounded. They change, but they do not vanish, because their roots are not just in soil. They are in story, in ritual, in the simple, enduring act of planting a seed and trusting the sky. To walk the dragon's backbone is to witness a contract between humans and the earth, a contract signed with sweat and sun, renewed with every harvest. It's a reminder that progress does not always mean speed, and that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it murmurs, like a stream slipping over stone. And perhaps that is why the terraces speak to so many, from farmers to travelers to dreamers, because they represent what we've nearly forgotten, that the most lasting things in this world are not built with force, but with rhythm, humility, and time. The dragon sleeps, the people endure, and the mountain remembers. Most visitors to Giza lift their eyes to the sky, drawn to the towering silhouettes of the pyramids and the unblinking gaze of the Great Sphinx, but few ask what lies beneath, under the sand, under the Nile, under centuries of forgotten currents. For in the quiet shallows near the ancient village of Abu Rawash, just a short distance from the Giza Plateau, a strange tale stirs. It speaks of something enormous, eroded and ignored, an underwater sphinx. Local fishermen have whispered of it for generations, a smooth-backed shape that seems too symmetrical to be natural, a feline form half buried in mud and waterlogged sediment. When the Nile's waters recede during droughts, parts of it emerge, stone curves, grooves, and what some swear is a carved paw, impossibly worn, but unmistakably shaped by hands. It doesn't sit among the tourist routes. There are no guideposts, no velvet ropes, no tour buses idling nearby, just an area thick with reeds, brackish water, and silence. Explorers who ventured there claim the land itself feels different, charged, as if memory clings to it. Beneath the murk, sonar scans have picked up geometric patterns and what appear to be blocks placed with intent. But what truly startles are the claims that this figure, a sphinx-like formation submerged near Giza, may predate the pyramids entirely. Not by decades, by millennia. If true, it would shatter the established chronology of Egyptian civilization. The mainstream timeline anchors the Great Sphinx at around 2500 BCE, but this underwater form, if genuinely carved, could belong to an age when the Sahara was still green and the Nile ran wild through a wetter, lusher land. Skeptics, of course, dismiss it. A misidentified rock formation, they say, limestone shaped by water and wishful thinking. But the grooves, the curves, the alignment with celestial markers, it all invites more questions than answers. The area near the Giza Plateau where this mysterious shape lies hasn't been officially excavated. Most archaeologists haven't paid it much attention, brushing it off as nothing important. Maybe that's true, or maybe it's not just part of Egypt's past, but a piece of a much older world swallowed by floods and time. Right now, what some call the underwater sphinx just sits there, quiet, not asleep, just waiting. If it could speak, who knows what it would say, or why so many seem unwilling to hear it. Back in the 1980s, the story started picking up steam. Before that, it was just something passed around in hushed conversations. Rumors about a huge lion-shaped figure partly hidden in the waters near Giza. Then a few independent divers and researchers shared strange reports. Some even had blurry photos showing what looked like carved stone under the water. The images weren't convincing to most, but they lit a spark. People started asking questions, and more dangerously, they started doubting the usual story. One amateur Egyptologist was especially vocal. He claimed to have seen the figure himself, exposed briefly when water levels dropped during a drought. According to him, it wasn't just a rock. It had shape, structure, legs, and what looked like the remains of a carved face. He said it had symmetry, like someone had built it, not something formed by nature. That idea shook the foundations of traditional archaeology. Most experts didn't take it seriously. Egyptology is built on structure, on timelines that place the pyramids and the Great Sphinx around 2500 BCE during Pharaoh Khafre's time. If there was another Sphinx-like monument, older and buried, it could throw the entire timeline into question, not just for Egypt, but for human history overall. Academics were quick to push back. Without a proper dig, solid dating, or layers of earth studied and documented, they dismissed the idea. Many said what people were seeing was probably just limestone shaped by nature. They reminded everyone that in Egypt, erosion by wind, water, and time can do amazing things. Sometimes nature really does make things that look man-made. Still, the photos kept popping up. Sonar scans showed patterns in the water, too neat, too smooth, too suspicious. That's when others jumped in. Writers, filmmakers, fringe historians. They started building entire theories around the idea. Maybe this wasn't just a natural shape. Maybe it was a piece of a lost civilization, Atlantean, or something before dynastic Egypt. They brought up the old water damage on the Great Sphinx itself, pointing to deep erosion that didn't match the usual desert wear and tear. Instead, they argued, the damage looked like it came from long periods of rain. Heavy rain, the kind Giza hadn't seen since around 7000 BCE. One geologist, Dr. Robert Schoch, even studied the Sphinx directly and supported this idea. If he was right, the Sphinx, or at least its base, might be thousands of years older than what's in the history books. Despite the growing buzz, no official excavation ever happened. Museums stayed quiet. No announcements, no digs, just that shape in the water, half buried in silence. Still there, still unknown. Whether it's a trick of erosion or a piece of something we're not ready to admit, it remains stuck between what we know and what we're not sure we want to know. Long before Egypt had pharaohs or hieroglyphs, before names were etched into stone, water may have already been shaping monuments, and possibly hiding them too. One such mystery lies near ancient floodplains, in a lower region close to Abu Rawash. Here, the so-called underwater Sphinx rests, half lost beneath silt and seasonal floodwaters. Satellite images and radar scans have revealed something unusual. Rectangular outlines, possible foundations, and shapes that seem too deliberate to be natural. All of it buried. These clues hint that this structure might not only be older than the famous Sphinx at Giza, it could date back to a time when Egypt hadn't yet begun writing its story in symbols or stone. Supporters of the theory believe this site connects to one of the biggest gaps in human history, the period between the end of the Ice Age and the first Egyptian dynasties. During this time, the Nile changed its path, the Sahara dried up from grasslands into desert, and entire civilizations may have risen and disappeared without a trace. No writing, no records, just lost to time. To many traditional historians, the idea that a pre-literate culture could have built something as massive as a sphinx seems unlikely. But then again, so did Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. That site was built around 9600 BCE by hunter-gatherers and features massive carved stone pillars decorated with animals, thousands of years older than Stonehenge. So what if Egypt hides a similar secret? What if an ancient people, long before hieroglyphs and papyrus, marked their existence in stone and were later drowned by time and tide? If the underwater Sphinx was created during such an age, it wouldn't just be another monument. It would be evidence of a forgotten chapter of human history. A time that might have whispered its knowledge to later civilizations like the builders of Giza. A time that still speaks, quietly, through the stone. Geologists studying the area near Abu Rawash have found curious erosion patterns, smooth, curved grooves that suggest prolonged exposure to water, not sand or wind. The same kind of erosion has been debated at the Sphinx in Giza, where the vertical wear inside the enclosure doesn't look like wind damage at all. It looks like heavy, sustained rain. Rain that hasn't touched that region in thousands of years. The site near Abu Rawash shows similar signs, only this time, they're hidden under a shallow basin. During dry periods, some parts of the shape reportedly become visible again. What look like shoulders, a sloping back, even a flat base that doesn't match the randomness of natural rock. Researchers note that the ground here is geologically active, rich in clay, and has a history of fluctuating water tables and violent floods. The stone itself is worn, but not at random. The erosion flows with the form, as if water moved across carved shapes, not jagged natural ones. Some of the surrounding sediment layers go back to the early Holocene, a time when Egypt was lush, green, and vulnerable to massive flooding. If someone had carved a monument during that period, it could have stood for generations before a flood buried it under mud and memory. Skeptics call all of this coincidence, natural shapes mistaken for something meaningful by people desperate for a mystery. But symmetry doesn't come easily from erosion. Water moves, it weathers, but it rarely carves forms that look planned. And yet here, beneath the mud and floodplain, lies something that seems to remember being shaped, something that still waits. Water doesn't shape pores. It doesn't carve out flat, aligned bases or mimic the proportions of a sphinx that stands just a few miles away. If water erased this monument from view, what else did it take? And more urgently, how much of our history is still buried untouched just below the surface? If that submerged shape is truly a sphinx, ancient, carved, and silent, why hasn't it been excavated? Why does it remain locked under layers of silt, overlooked by experts, passed by without so much as a shovel in the ground? The reasons, like the figure itself, lie just out of sight. Egypt is fiercely protective of its ancient heritage. Its archaeological process is full of strict rules, layers of oversight, and a deep resistance to shaking the foundations of what's already accepted. To dig, researchers need permission, resources, international approval, and most of all, an invitation from the state. And Egypt's institutions don't grant those lightly, especially if a project might rewrite the timeline of its ancient glory. The so-called underwater Sphinx has never had a sanctioned excavation. It's been studied by independent explorers, fringe historians, and foreign researchers, but without state support, their work remains unofficial, suggestive, dismissed. Add to that the challenges of the location. The Nile doesn't sit still. It rises and falls, shifting across seasons and years. The area where this monument may lie is flood-prone and submerged for most of the year. Uncovering it would mean draining the land, redirecting water, protecting fragile habitats, and finding ways to excavate stone under pressure from centuries of sediment. That's not a weekend job. It could take years, maybe decades, and the politics can't be ignored. A discovery like this would cause shockwaves. It would rewrite what we know about Egyptian civilization, rattle global academic circles, and attract media chaos. Egypt, understandably, is careful about what it brings into the spotlight. The Ministry of Antiquities prefers finds that reinforce national pride, not shake it. There are whispers, of course. Some say secret research has already been done quietly behind closed doors, that someone, somewhere, knows more. But without public reports, no peer-reviewed studies, no official word, it's just speculation. So the monument, if it is one, remains untouched, not necessarily forgotten, but paused, suspended in mud, myth, and skepticism. It's a strange twist, isn't it? In a country famous for guarding its ancient past, one of the oldest mysteries may be hiding in plain sight, passed over every day and still completely unclaimed. Yet time has a habit of revealing what it buries. The ancient Egyptians didn't build sphinxes just as decoration. They meant something: guardians, gods, mysteries in stone. The Sphinx combined a lion's power with a ruler's mind, placed where the physical met the spiritual. The most famous one, Giza's Great Sphinx, stands 66 feet tall, staring east as it has for over 4,000 years. Some believe Pharaoh Khafre built it. Others think it's older. Its face changed long after the body was shaped. The truth is still debated. Now imagine if another one, carved before even that, sits waiting under the Nile's waters, scarred by floods, shaped by hands we no longer remember. That would change everything. There are no records of a second Sphinx near Giza. No ancient texts describe twin guardians. The history books are silent. But the stone, if it's there, might not be. In later Greco-Roman traditions, the idea of sacred guardians, positioned in balance, flanking important places, was common. Ancient Egyptian architecture often followed the same pattern. Twin statues, twin obelisks, rows of lions lining the paths to temples, symmetry mattered. So if there's one Sphinx standing guard over Giza, why not a second? Some researchers believe the so-called underwater Sphinx might not be a replica at all. It could be the original, a prototype. A monument built by an unknown civilization before the pharaohs ruled, before Egypt's official history began. If that's true, then the concept of the Sphinx didn't start in the dynastic era. It was adopted, adapted, and made grander over time. The true origin might trace back to people who left no writing, no royal seals, just stone and memory. Its purpose, then, might not be tied to any pharaoh. It could have served something older, aligned with the stars, tied to rituals long forgotten, or built to mark a great event. The lion shape is no coincidence either. In ancient Egypt, lions were symbols of the horizon, of the gateway between night and day. A sphinx looking east was always watching for the sunrise, guarding the rebirth of light. To carve one in stone was to lock that sacred moment in time. Now imagine one that predates the pyramids, placed with purpose, carved to wait. it would shift everything we think we know. It wouldn't just reshape Egyptian history. It would reframe Egypt as not the beginning, but the last echo of something even older. And the fact that such a symbol could be buried beneath water, it fits. A sentinel asleep in the deep, a monument keeping watch over a forgotten age. As more people hear about this underwater sphinx, a deeper divide has grown. Not in the land, but in how we see history. On one side are the traditional Egyptologists, careful, structured, focused on academic proof. On the other are the outsiders, independent researchers, alternative historians, curious minds who think something big is being ignored. The mainstream wants evidence, peer-reviewed papers, proper excavation, measurable data. Their caution makes sense. Egypt is full of rock shapes that look meaningful, but aren't. Misreading one can spin myths out of nothing. And once something's been sensationalized, it's hard to bring it back to truth. Archaeology needs to be gentle. History doesn't get a second chance once it's damaged. But critics say caution has turned into avoidance. Many of these independent investigators are trained scientists or engineers. They point to satellite images showing suspicious symmetry, radar scans revealing flat foundations buried in mud, and erosion that looks shaped, not random. To them, it's not about chasing myths. It's about looking harder. They also raise questions about silence. Egypt's tourist industry leans heavily on familiar monuments and established stories. A new sphinx, especially one that challenges the accepted timeline, could threaten that narrative. Not because it's a hoax, but because it means rewriting everything. Now, the idea of the underwater sphinx is everywhere. Books, podcasts, documentaries, conferences. For some, it's become a rallying cry for hidden history. For others, a cautionary tale about pseudoscience. But somewhere in the middle, where the noise settles, the real question remains. Buried like the monument itself under layers of debate, politics, and silt. This isn't just an argument between scholars. It's about how we treat the past. Do we only believe what's been confirmed, printed, and cataloged? Or do we allow ourselves to follow the clues that aren't fully explained yet? The underwater sphinx brings that question to the surface. It's more than just stone. It's a test of how far we're willing to go for the truth, and how much wonder we still allow ourselves to feel. As long as it stays buried, the debate will go on, two sides arguing over a silent shape in the mud that might mean everything or nothing at all. There's something eerie about a mystery that hides in the open, especially one that might have a lion's face and a human story we've forgotten. The so-called underwater sphinx near Giza may still be unproven, but that hasn't stopped people from being drawn to it. Its power lies in what it makes us feel, not just curiosity, but a deeper pull, something like memory. Maybe it's not just about discovering something new, but about remembering something old. Something we didn't even know we'd lost. Because when people hear about a monument that may have been carved before history began, it triggers something ancient in us, the awareness that time erases more than it preserves. We've always lived with ruins. Civilizations crumble, cities disappear, languages fade. We try to piece together what came before, not just to learn, but to understand ourselves. How long have we been here? What kind of people came before us? What stories did they leave behind? And how many were lost in the flood, in fire, in time? If the underwater sphinx was carved before recorded history, it's more than an artifact. It's a voice from a time we don't know. Maybe the builders understood the stars in ways we've forgotten. Maybe they honored the earth in ways we can't imagine now. Some believe it's a leftover from an advanced civilization lost in some ancient disaster. That's a theory many experts reject, but the emotions it stirs up are real. Just the idea that something so huge, so carefully made, could be swallowed by rising waters and erased, that shakes us. It reminds us how fragile everything is. And that's probably why this story won't go away. It challenges the idea that we've already discovered all the big stuff. It reminds us that the world still has questions we haven't answered. In a time when so much of life is explained, measured, and uploaded, this mystery stands apart. It can't be solved with a satellite or a search bar. It makes us stop. It makes us wonder. Maybe it's not even a real sphinx. Maybe it's just a rock shaped by time and weather. But the fact that it still sparks this much imagination says something important. It reminds us that the past might be deeper than we think, that myths might hold scraps of memory, that something could still be hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for us to look closer. The underwater sphinx, whether it's a masterpiece or a coincidence, hasn't moved. It rests beneath mud and time, with no name, no fanfare, no official recognition. And yet, in staying silent, it says a lot. For every famous monument dug up and polished for display, there are others still buried, too delicate, too hidden, or too controversial to touch. Some are simply lost to history, and some, like this one, sit in plain sight, overlooked not because they lack meaning, but because they ask the kind of questions we're not ready to face. That might be the real power of the underwater sphinx, not its scale or mystery, but its silence. It reflects the limits of what we know and the edges of what we're willing to believe. It challenges our comfort with the version of history we've agreed on. Maybe it will never be excavated. Politics, money, and tradition build walls higher than stone, but that doesn't make it meaningless. In fact, it may be more important because of its mystery. It's a mirror showing us not only what might be buried in the earth, but what might be buried in ourselves, what we notice, what we ignore, what we're afraid to ask. It proves that history isn't finished. It's scattered across the land and sea, waiting for new eyes, new thinking, and the courage to look again. Maybe one day the water will pull back. Maybe the shape will emerge. Maybe we'll finally see the full form, the face, the lines carved by hands long gone. Or maybe we won't. But until then, it waits. And it speaks in the quiet way that only the past can. Maybe one day radar will finally prove what legends have been hinting at for generations. Or maybe this mystery will stay just as it is, something passed down like a story in hushed voices, drifting between stones and centuries. But no matter what the truth turns out to be, the underwater sphinx has already done something powerful. It's sparked wonder. In a time when so much feels explained, when everything seems certain and mapped out, that spark is rare. And maybe that's the real reason it matters. Maybe the oldest things we're searching for aren't just lost in the sand or buried underwater. Maybe they're inside us, in our urge to look deeper, to remember, to believe that the past still has something to say. That out there, beneath the waves or the dunes, something ancient is still breathing, still waiting for us to find it.